Texas GOP recently revealed their party platform. And boy, is it interesting. Now, this platform contains many little gems, such as their strident opposition to socialism. Okay, fair enough. They also made sure to ban Sharia law, because that was an issue in Texas, apparently. They also opposed doing any sort of constitutional convention to amend the Constitution. Interesting. They also made sure to oppose reparations for slavery, which I didn't think was something that a lot of people were fighting for, and fighting the insidious Agenda 21. And this is just among many other things, ranging from crazy to actually somewhat sensible. Pretty much the only sensible things in there that I've seen were getting rid of NDAA and the Patriot Act. So, hey, points for that, I guess. But a good example of what isn't sensible is their demonization of homosexuality that is inscribed right into the platform. For example, and this is quoting from the platform, quote, homosexuality must not be presented as an acceptable alternative lifestyle in public policy, nor should family be redefined to include homosexual couples. We believe there should be no granting of special legal entitlements or creation of special status for homosexual behavior, regardless of state of origin. And in it, this platform also supports the debunked psychologically damaging idea of gay reparative therapy. Cure the gays. Quote, we recognize the legitimacy and value of counseling, which offers reparative therapy and treatment to patients who are seeking escape from the homosexual lifestyle. No laws or executive orders shall be imposed to limit or restrict access to this type of therapy. Now, gay reparative therapy has been declared invalid by nearly all the relevant medical organizations, and in 2009, the American Psychological Association, or APA, published a report that looked at all the peer-reviewed literature on conversion therapy and concluded that the evidence unequivocally showed that attempts to change sexual orientation are ineffective. You cannot change the gay. You can't pray away the gay. You can't cure the gay. It just don't work. But since it is the Texas Republican Party, I'm pretty sure Rick Perry, governor of Texas, would like to add the APA to the list of organizations that he'd like to get rid of. That's if he could remember them all. Now, one of the Texas lawmakers, named Brian Hughes, went on Anderson Cooper's TV show on CNN and was grilled by Anderson Cooper. Check this out. Got a video of it. It's awesome.
Representative Hughes, why did you think it was necessary to put something in the state party platform advocating so-called reparative therapy for gay people? Why is that in the Republican Party platform?
The language is in the platform because we want to make sure that people have rights. And we heard from people that wanted access to that kind of counseling, that kind of therapy. And so we believe in free speech and free choice. It's not being forced on anyone, but for folks who want it, it should be available.
But is that under threat? I mean, was that really even a question? I know in New Jersey and California, it's still allowed. I know a lot of people in Texas kind of have been indicating that it's been banned, but you know that's not true.
That there were concerns from California, New Jersey, maybe other states, that it could be limited or taken away in some cases. A neighbor of one of our delegates had been through this therapy. It was helpful to him, and he was concerned it might be taken away. This is about giving people choices. If they want this, it should be available to them.
Even if the vast majority of medical associations say that actually this form of alleged counseling or alleged therapy is actually can be harmful to kids, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Counseling Association, American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, the American School Counselor Association, the National Association of School Psychologists, National Association of Social Workers. I mean, they represent 500,000 mental health professionals. They all say this is not a mental disorder and it's not something that needs to be cured.
Well, there are members of those groups who feel differently. Some testified before the committee. Some have testified in other places. People testified before the platform committee at our convention, both pro and con. Individuals,
that's actually not true,
professionals, therapists.
You know that it's actually
I beg your pardon?
That's actually not true. I know people testified for it in front of the platform, but according to a number of groups, gay groups there, who weren't even allowed to have booths at where the platform was, they weren't allowed to argue against it because of a parliamentary procedure. Debate was closed before they had a chance to voice their opposition to it, and it was immediately put to a vote. You're aware of that, right?
I think we're conflating the process. In the platform committee, there was testimony on the issue. When the bill came to the floor,
who testified? Do you know?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
The fact that you view being gay as or you characterize it as a mistake or something that should be changed, really kind of maybe says more about your position than what your words actually say. Over the years, this party platform has actually had a lot of language which is very anti-gay. In fact, up until this year, your platform said homosexuality tears at the fabric of society. And that's a platform I assume you supported, correct?
Well, as we discussed, there was a debate on these issues at the convention. Some folks wanted stronger language, some folks wanted different language.
Right, but in the past, that language was in there. So you supported that, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
You believe that homosexuality tears the fabric of society.
Hey, at least he's being honest, right? So this guy, of course, supports this harmful, stupid, ridiculous gay reparative therapy that's been shown to harm children more than it is to help them, which it doesn't help them at all, because he supports freedom. Yes, the freedom to hate yourself, put yourself through torture to deny who you are for no reason, because you can't actually become ungay. Now, his arguments boiled down to, and it didn't show that I didn't get to it in the clip. It was a long clip. Basically, his arguments boiled down to God, love the sinner, hate the sin, and freedom. Freedom to choose. Because of a guy he knows that may have lied to him about it working, if it even exists. Anyway, I could go on all day about this guy and his bullshit, but I'd like to open it up to the panel since this is a panel show, and I want to start with you, Dan.
Yeah, I think the great part about all of these kinds of conservative movements, whether it's climate change or now, homophobia continued from the last 30 years of public debate about it, is the idea of the I know a guy strategy, which is they're basically so desperate, despite mountains of evidence against their causes. They're like, well, I went to Google and I found somebody. Like, that's essentially where their debate is now. So yeah, it's super depressing. I mean, like, these ideas of it's hurting the fabric of society. It's just so absurd. It's almost, it's depressing at such an alarming rate. And I wish all of the cable news hosts would have these guys on and do that kind of pinata treatment to them. So by the way, sir, what was the person who testified's name? I wasn't there. It's what happens there. So right. So every time we challenge you on a point, you really don't have a point. So I wish that the emperor no clothes tactic from journalists would be used a lot more often. And I wish that it wasn't just Maddow and Anderson Cooper who had to do this constantly. It would be nice to see all of the press take these guys to task, and the local news. It's silly, it's stupid, and it's also anti-freedom, because a lot of the people you're talking about are children. Like, the people that go into these kind of ridiculous voodoo therapy ideas are not necessarily a 40-year-old guy who's just decided after years and years of homosexuality that maybe I should check this out. It's like a 15-year-old kid whose parents are trying to send him to a camp to try to straighten him out. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to protect. If you're not protecting children, who are we protecting? But of course, the right wing and these kinds of people, they'll look the other way this time around, because we're big on protecting children, but not the gay children. So that's really what's frustrating about this, and there's not a whole lot you can say. It's not a two-sided issue, obviously. This is insane.
Right, and I love how they attempted to make it a two-sided issue. Well, there's another side. Once again, I had to cut that out since it was a really long clip, but I'll put it in the comments for full context, or I'm sorry, in the description. He basically said, well, the both sides, there are two sides to this issue, and they're both equal. And that's the problem with the media that we get into. And I'm glad, and like, CNN is especially guilty with this when it comes to climate change, but I'm really actually glad to see that they're not taking it with this issue, that Anderson Cooper is just continuing to pummel this guy over and over again. It was fantastic. Speaking of the media angle, let's go to Stephen, and I want to see what you think about this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Dan said. I mean, this guy, this platform, it's first of all, just on the platform itself, do the Texans think that they're going to win on this platform? I mean, they must do if they've put it forward, and that just goes to show that they're in such a bubble in Texas, and for a lot of the southern states in America. It's just incredible. And the thing that annoys me, particularly about the language, is the Republicans and the right, well, not all Republicans, but the right wingers always talk about kind of the gay lifestyle. And I don't know what they mean by the gay lifestyle. It's almost, what I think they're thinking is that they have some sort of weird caricature of the gay lifestyle, kind of the Californian gay, kind of, ooh, how's your father, sort of. It's just nonsense. I don't know how. I mean, those sort of stereotypes existed back in the 20s, back in the 30s. It's like times have changed, and and just towards kind of the science, he's saying, oh well, kind of, you want to have a discussion about this, and some people are in favour of it. I mean, personally, I feel quite strongly about all these pseudosciences. Like, I don't care if you're in favour of wanting to have kind of crystal healing therapy. No, you're not allowed it because it doesn't work. It's a waste of money. It's a drain on the economy when you could be spending your money helping the economy in some other way. Same with this gay reparative therapy. It's not therapy. It's nonsense. It's actively hurting children. The people who wrote this platform in Texas are basically saying we're in favour of harming children. That's essentially what all the clinical professionals have said. What this therapy does, it harms children in many instances. And that's what they seem to be arguing in favour of. The guy's a moron. The Texas kind of GOP platform writers, they're morons. And fair play to Anderson Cooper, because in respect to that, Dan's right. The media does need to kind of start beating these people with sticks more often. There are very few people in the mainstream media in America who will come out when they have these absolute insane nut jobs and attack them. I mean, okay, Bill O'Reilly, your Sean Hannity's and Fox News, they'll attack what they consider nut jobs when those nut jobs are just actually putting forward fairly reasonable positions just on the other side of the coin. Whereas, in the UK, for the most part, we have a good number of journalists rather who will hold politicians' feet to the fire when they come out and say stupid stuff. In America, Anderson Cooper does a fairly good job, but I mean, he's about the only one on CNN that I can think of. Maddow does a fairly good job. Chris Hayes every now and again, but it's kind of, if there's some sort of incentive where every time that you piss off a politician you get a pay raise, I'd be happy with that sort of system.
There you go. All right, we're going to go to you, Jordan. What do you think?
One, I want to kind of dial back the CNN praise, because let's keep it real. Like, this isn't CNN refusing to let this issue go. This is Anderson Cooper, who has a vested interest in this issue, refusing to let it go. If this had been any other host on CNN, they would have let it go. So it's not like CNN is standing up and doing the right thing here. I guess maybe they're letting Anderson Cooper, fight for something that's very dear to him. I guess maybe they should get credit for that, but that seems like the most mundane thing to allow a news anchor to do. So just I kind of want to temper that a little bit. But then going forward, Jeff, if you could, I want to point out why Texas should not be doing this. Dan and Stephen have already pointed out from a humanitarian, like a common sense, what about the children point of view, way better than I could. There's no need for me to expound on that any further. But Jeff, if you could read, there was one thing that they brought up about not granting homosexuals any special status or something like that you read off whenever you were listing the things there.
Let me read it to you again. We believe that there should be no granting of special legal entitlements or creation of special status for homosexual behavior, regardless of state of origin.
Okay, so first off, I want to point out, one, why that's a nonsensical thing, because there is no push to create some special status or unique status for homosexuals. There's a push for them to have the right to have the same status everyone else does. It's not like there's some kind of super married that gay people can be that straight people can't, that has extra rights attached to it. That's ridiculous. But then, so after them, I guess, pushing this plank that doesn't make any sense and is addressing an issue that not only doesn't exist, but I can't imagine a way that it could exist, unless maybe if you got gay married, then you could break the law. I don't know. But anyway, they create this plank that no one's fighting for, and then they themselves fight for the nonsensical plank. And what I mean by that is because by pushing to make this gay restorative therapy a legitimate medical treatment or whatever, they're giving gays two special statuses that straight people don't have. One, they've created a pre-existing condition that I suppose insurance companies wouldn't be allowed to deny them for, and of course Texas is one of the states fighting. So, I'm sorry?
Yeah. I was just going to say, being gay, covered by Obamacare, only in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got that. There's a special status that this creates for gay people, and then also, well, I guess the pre-existing condition not being denied is one, and then the fact that you can get your insurance to pay for witch doctors in Texas, but only if you're gay. So again, there's another special status that this position gives. So someone needs to point out to the Texas GOP that they are violating their own rules. And in order to stay true to their conservative values, they need to ban gay restorative therapy.
Wow, that makes a very interesting case. All right, let's go to you, Dan. Take us home, sir. Take us home.
So this is a couple of things that I think are really interesting with this story, which is we'll take it back to Steven's point. So let's go to the media first. Let's take care of that. So I totally agree with both of you who've mentioned the idea of like maybe not giving CNN too much credit. One of my favorite lines that Jon Stewart ever had about Anderson Cooper was that he has a segment called Keeping Him Honest. Jon Stewart once remarked, that would be like me having a segment on the Daily Show called Comedian Tells Jokes for Laughs. Like, it's supposed to be your job, right? Like, the whole show is supposed to be keeping them honest. So we'll forget that for a second. I don't mind that he has a vested interest in that and that he did his job. I just wish the whole show would be that all the time. And I think that that's sort of what we should be going for. The second point that I would bring up with somebody brought up, Stephen, I think it was lifestyle. And I think that's the sad thing about at the end of this whole thing, they don't really care. They don't really probably believe that you can do it with therapy, but it's still a huge voting base, and we've got elections coming up, and these are things. That's what they're playing to. They know that it's all kind of BS, but to say that out loud in public still gets people riled, and it's still a way to get money. You send that in a mailer, and that's a lot more interesting than it is to be like, why don't you take a closer look at the issues, sir? And that's, unfortunately, as we've said a couple times before in this show, listen, that whole bill is that whole section is going to be about as useless as you could possibly make it once the states, one Supreme Court after another and after another start going, sorry, every state's going to say, no, actually, that actually breaks our Constitution. So, they can pretend that gay marriage is never going to exist, and we're going to see a whole bunch of people try to stick their head in the sand and pretend that, society isn't progressing. But at the end of the day, I think what's really depressing about the whole situation is that we're going to end up in a place where you're going to see more and more of these mailers, more and more of this ridiculous, out of left field, language that really doesn't mean anything. They probably won't really legislate. They just put it in their platform because, hey, look, we put it in our platform, homophobes. You can vote for us. And that's what's really sad. Is that they're gaming the system. They're trying to get the last 3 miles out of homophobia for their own voting interests, and that's really where things get depressing. And I will say, from a Canadian standpoint, it does bring down to this kind of crazy stuff that we get in Canada, because we get all your cable news channels and we get a lot of American content up here. People were doing kind of a victory lap a little bit this week because we in Ontario elected our first, the nation's first elected openly gay female premier. And, everybody was like, what was really awesome is we just did that without it never even came up in the campaign. It wasn't even an issue. And so everybody was kind of like at the end of that, like, well, that's pretty good. But, you know, as awesome as that is, it's still sad that you actually still have to say that. Like, isn't it amazing that people aren't hate-filled? Like, you know, going back to another great comedian where, you know, Chris Rock, one of my favorite lines he has is, you know, when he talks about racism, he said, my grandfather didn't suddenly deserve to eat at the same table as you. He didn't gain rights. White people got less crazy. And I really think that that's a great point about the, you know, homophobia issue or the anti-gay issue, which is just people are getting less crazy. And, of course, some of these people are getting more crazy. And it's sad that they're trying to game it for votes. But, you know, things are going the right direction on gay rights, and these people are losing. And I wish that all media would pinata them in front of the world to see, like that Anderson Cooper segment. Because the most important part of that segment isn't about yelling like Bill O'Reilly. It was about facts. It was about listing the medical associations that believe that what you're trying to say is valid for taxpayer dollars is complete hooey by all of these associations. And then, you know, that's where the difference between, you know, spanking somebody on Fox News and spanking them in real news, facts.